I participate in architecture in a number of different platforms. Firstly, there's Stephen Fong Architect. Secondly, I have a consulting firm that does hospitality and retail, and that's called Office Make Good. And thirdly, I'm a faculty member at University of Toronto's Daniels Faculty of Architecture. And so the office is actually located about 5 minutes walk from the school. And we've always had a steady stream of students, recent graduates, and various people from the school over at the office, and they've contributed tremendously to our practice, along with a few long-standing contributors. I'd like to say at the school, I teach I co-teach a course in entrepreneurship with a well-known local entrepreneur named Lauren Gertner. And in that course, we think about the agency of architects in an economy that's increasingly a consumer and a market-driven economy. And in that light, the project that I've done with Stephen Fong Architect, K-Town, A Future, is very much aligned with a number of the things that we teach in that course. Our project is an architectural solution to the financial precariousness of small businesses in diaspora communities. And I think you know those kinds of small businesses. They tend to be little restaurants, little retail stores, typically in store frontages that are about 15 feet, sometimes with a couple of stories of building above them, sometimes with nothing above them. And you think about all those diaspora communities that make up Toronto. I mean, you can name them off: Little India, Little Portugal, Little Italy, Greek Town, Chinatown, Little Jamaica, Koreatown. There's just, in fact, there's a new one now that I didn't know before, Little Tibet. So all of these communities share some of the same problems. These are people who've come to the country recently. These communities are like landing pads. And these small storefronts are really economic tools for these recent immigrants to start businesses, to get a foothold in the country. And so we looked at these and we found out that increasingly these storefronts are becoming unviable, and these small restaurants are becoming unviable. And we thought about it. We thought, is there an architectural solution to this? Is there a way that we could make things better so that the landlords and the small business owners could have a greater chance at success? And our project is very much based on that. So in a nutshell, what we do is we simply try to figure out a way to maximize leasable space. We noticed that the second and third stories on a lot of these buildings are unused because they're too dilapidated. They're not sufficiently renovated in order to rent out. So we make a retail space that's a better quality. So we have looked at some of these merchants and restaurateurs, and we noticed that a lot of them are not attuned to what we call the experience economy, that in order to do a value-added product, you have to offer consumers an experience now. And so we work with people and we think, how can you do that? We plan for a renovation where the upper floors have good quality residential amenities. So we tried to mirror what you would get in a good quality condominium. And lastly, we thought about this notion of flexible space. And this was probably just pre-pandemic. We were thinking about Airbnb, co-workspaces, and all of these kinds of things. And these, our building has been outfitted so that it could be used in a variety of ways. So that's what we were trying to do in this particular project. Well, as I noted, there are perhaps a dozen diaspora communities in Toronto. And so we thought this is applicable to Koreatown, but is also applicable to all of these diaspora communities. And in fact, it's applicable to many main streets in Toronto, the kind of low-rise main streets that are adjacent to residential neighborhoods. One of the things we've noticed about the City of Toronto official plan is that it tends to imagine that its actions are about permanent and fixed outcomes, and that it also is based on this notion of rational urban planning. And what we found in the diaspora communities is a lot of these things are not so rational. They're about people who are trying to do something in the vein of self-determination. They're banding together, and they're not also thinking in terms of fixed and permanent solutions. These are temporal solutions. And so this issue of urbanism as perhaps a temporal practice should be discussed. How do we think about cities not simply as the final end game building that's put there, but also as a series of temporal stages? So you see in any of these diaspora communities, like in Koreatown, if I could just take that as an example, at one time it was a landing pad for South Americans. And so you still see one or two South American restaurants sprinkled in with the Korean restaurants. At another time, a lot of it was Greek. And so you still see a few scattered Greek landlords mixed in with the Korean landlords. So there's that issue of temporality that I'm talking about. And also the temporality of the current situation is of interest. And I think one of the things that can be clearly seen is that the condition that we've identified, this inability of the small businesses to afford the taxes and the costs of running their businesses on these strips, has been exacerbated in the year 2020 by the COVID-19 situation. It has shown with even greater urgency the need to think about some of these issues. Through my involvement at University of Toronto and at other places, and especially with our office make good efforts, we know a lot of entrepreneurs. And so we're in that situation where we can develop the project. So we have been developing this project. We have been doing this building. We're actually almost prepared to open it. And so for us, especially at this scale, it's about proof of concept, and we're ready to do that. We're about to launch a hospitality venture in the ground floor of this building. We're about to finish it. And we want to demonstrate to the public that there's an agency to entrepreneurship, that entrepreneurship can be about social purpose, about social good, and that there's potentially a model that can be replicated in other parts of the city.